Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I'm your host, Benedikt Hein, and we are live podcasting here from the Studioszene event in beautiful Hamburg. We are here at the Studiosofa. The people at Sound and Recording let us use this, and it's been very great the past couple of days, and we've got some very cool guests here. And I'm here with my co-host and friend Malcolm Owen Flood, as always.
Last day, can't believe it.
Yeah,
flew by.
Absolutely. And our guest today is Martin Zobel from Analogvibes.
Yeah.
Hello, Martin. How
Thanks
are
for
you?
having me. Yeah, great to be here. It's been a great show so far.
Awesome.
Great to have you.
Great to have you. Yeah. Also, thank you for coming here live and joining us here in front of the sofa. Really, really cool. Early today, so glad you're here. So yeah, today, our show is about helping musicians record themselves in their jam spaces and home studios and help them get better sounding, exciting sounding records there. And we know that part of our community is also not only into DIY recording, but also into actually building DIY gear. So this is a very relevant topic for us. I'm very glad we have you here. And also, Malcolm and I, to be honest, don't know too much about that side of things. So I can only speak for myself, but I can fix a cable, or swap out a pickup on a guitar, but that's about it.
Yeah, if I have to.
Yeah, exactly. So we're very glad to have an expert here and to tell us something about it all. So please, maybe just give us your quick backstory, like how you got into building your own gear and how it all started and what you're doing at Analogvibes.
Well, I'm a musician. I've been touring and recording for many years, and when I started out, I was just working all in the box. Because I'm a digital native, that's all I had, that's all I knew, and that's all I could afford. So I had all these plugins about, LA2As, Pultecs and whatnot, and I kind of had to believe that they sound like the real deal, and I had no way to prove or verify that. And when I had my first bigger record deal, I had the chance to go to Los Angeles and record in a studio where everything was present. And I'm a lead vocalist, so that was really an absolute eye-opener. I had the cans, the sound on the cans was just like a record, and I was so inspired, And of course, I performed completely differently, It was like magic for me, And then, when that from that very moment, it was obvious I couldn't go back and use that Pultec plugins or LA2A. It was just not giving me that sound, I heard. And that's basically how it all started, because I just was hunting for that sound. And obviously I couldn't afford to spend $13K, $14K for a used Pultec, was just not it. So I tried.
When was that?
That was 2010.
Okay, so there weren't this many clones available as well back then?
No, but I tried some, and it was just not giving me the sound, and I actually tried many. And so I started to find out, try to find out what was actually making that sound, what was the magic, and so I'm a very persistent person, so I kind of tried to find out who were the guys that were, that have the knowledge. So, for the Pultec, for example, I found Chris Preston, who's been servicing Pultec equalizers in the States for the last decades, and and I was kind of really asking him about everything, what's in there, what capacitors, and I was just trying to find out what is facts, what is fiction, and what is actually doing the sound. So I spent about 1 year only studying the Pultec,
Wow.
And then I started to build my first own LA2A from scratch, and I had so much respect because it's tube gear, there's high voltage present, and it's point to point, But then soon after I started, I found that the biggest barrier was in my head. It was just not that difficult. I mean, if you just focus,
Follow instructions.
Yes, and and when I finished my first LA2A and I switched it on, man, that was priceless.
Pretty happy.
I had that sound, and I did it myself. So that's how it all started. And then I just figured all the knowledge I gathered there. Some parts of it was from the DIY community. I mean, I talked about it yesterday here on stage. it was really tedious because you have like so much information and you have to navigate all your way through. You spend so much time, you know, and then I figured, since I knew that it was not that hard, you know, much more easy than I thought you know, at first sight, I decided, you know, if I could kind of curate that knowledge and make it accessible, others could do it as well. And that's how the idea of Analog Vibes started, actually.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Perfect. Thank you. And so to me, like, it's a two-part thing. So one part of it is like understanding the schematics and how these, you know, pieces of equipment work. But the other side is like actually knowing how to build something, like how to you know, which tools you use, how to solder, how to, you know, that part of side of things. So do you have a background in like electrical engineering?
No, not
or
at all.
anything
Not
like
at
that?
all.
Okay.
I'm just a musician, and you know, there's a lot of passion in it. And
Okay.
if I focus on something and there's a goal,
Okay.
I'm
figure it
like
out.
in a tunnel, you know. I just, yeah. So I do it as long as I get, you know, until I get there. So
Did things go wrong at the beginning?
of course,
Yeah.
a lot went wrong, you know, and I had to troubleshoot a lot. And I'm always telling the people from, you know, that are in the Vibes community now, because I feel like their biggest nightmare is they have to troubleshoot something. I mean, I get it, you know, sometimes it's a pain, but you have to go through it, and that was always the moment when I learned the most
Right.
about how this particular piece of gear actually works. And I think from a musician's or creator's point of perspective, that's critical to know how the gear that you're using actually works. You know, I'm like a painter, and I have to know my color palette, of course. So that completely changed my way of creating music. You know, and I have to just emphasize, when I tried all these plugins back then, like in 1176, for example, it took me so long to get my head around how this thing works, because you have the mouse and you always can just dial one thing at a time. And when I had the analog gear in front of me, it was like, you know, it was haptics that was going on, and I could close my eyes.
Yeah.
And that's critical, because this is what actually is going on. You have to listen for something and not check the wave files or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Being able to do it in real time and
Yeah.
adjust multiple parameters at once is
Yeah.
a huge
Yeah.
advantage.
And of course, a lot of things went wrong, but it's not rocket science. You know, it's just it's big capacitors. It's like it's doable, really. And I think if you just manage to translate the schematics, which, you know, many people don't even know to read, including myself at the beginning. If you translate it, it's really just more or less painting by numbers, you know. And that means I couldn't develop something like that myself, because I'm not an electronic engineer.
Yeah.
But I can build something that's already there, and from there on, you learn things, and then you can start to modify, of course.
Right. Yeah.
That sometimes happens, you know, by mistake.
Well, Benny and I, just 10 minutes before we got to meet you, Martin, I asked Benny, have you ever tried to make anything like a guitar pedal or gear like that? And we both said no. It seems like a daunting barrier of entry.
Yes.
Like it's intimidating, and that you'd have to spend a lot of time to get good enough. You know,
Exactly.
and is that the case, or is it actually way easier than we
It's
think?
in your head.
Yeah.
Totally. And to me, it's like, I understand how the gear works. I've been using it for so long, and it's all I do every day. It's my job, so I know how it works. I also know quite a bit about like how it works internally, but I still can't build it, or I believe I can't build it, because I don't know how to, you know, operate the tools properly, and what do I even need, and like,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I hear you. I mean, that's, you know, when we started to build this community, which actually also happened not on purpose, because I just posted stuff on the internet, and then people kept writing me emails from all over the world, you know, and we started to build these chassis that are really authentic, faithful recreations. So to make it easy, you know, you don't have to drill and everything. So I really get it, and you know, I've been talking to the community, and the community by now is like more than 7,000 people in the Analog Vibes community.
Great.
Yeah.
And whenever we come up with a new project, I try to find out the pain points, you know, what is holding you back from doing it? And this is exactly what I hear.
Yeah.
So I decided at some point to make a guide that covers all the basics, you know, everything you need to know, the precautions, like how to discharge capacitors, how to measure stuff. I included links to soldering tutorials to really take it by the hand, and I just put it on the website for free for everyone, so everyone can just download it and find out for themselves. You
Right.
know, if and then you can only decide if you do the next step and try to build something. And I have to say that many people that build our tube opto compressor, which is actually an LA2A, they haven't even built a guitar pedal before. That's
okay.
amazing. And
Wow.
so far, everybody has made it.
That's
All right.
awesome. That's awesome. I think we
You know-
skipped a step.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
okay.
you were learning, and then you made your own LA2A. But then when did Analog Vibes become Analog Vibes?
Right.
And really, just for people that don't know, what is Analog Vibes?
Yeah. So Analog Vibes was founded because I am an artist, and in Germany we have I'm registered as an artist. I'm not allowed to make any money or with anything else than music or arts. So, but then after all these requests came from all over the world, I found myself in the studio foyer just packing boxes for people in San Francisco, in Sydney, and whatever. And I found I have to
Create a business here.
create
yeah.
a business here because So then we founded Analog Vibes, and then because I had many friends and connections in the audio world by then, I found friends that have a warehouse and they are actually doing all the distribution.
Great.
So I didn't have to do it in my studio because I actually wanted to make music.
Yep.
And now Analog Vibes is actually all about enabling musicians or producers from all around the world to get their hands on the gear they've always dreamed of. And the claim we have for Analog Vibes is build your legends. And, of course, that is a certain, it's very attractive because if you do it with something that is unknown, you probably wouldn't have this intrinsic motivation to do it. But I mean, I wanted to have an LA2A so badly, so you go for it, and if it's accessible, it's even easier to do it. So
Awesome.
Analog Vibes is all about, enabling empowerment. That's actually the main factor, and I only realized that later because in the beginning I thought, yeah, it's just parts and boxes, and then people wrote me emails they were so grateful. People were kind of giving us original parts from back in the days they had in the garage. And they just said, do something about it. I have a gate stay level in the studio. It's broken, and was from a producer in Los Angeles, and he just sent it to me and said, if you fix it, and if you make a project out of it, you can keep it.
Wow.
Yeah. Very
So,
cool.
and that's incredible. So it's empowerment is the main
Awesome.
thing.
Yeah, thank you. So you said something in the beginning that I found interesting, and I think I can imagine people being interested in that too. You said there was a difference in the sound you were hunting for, basically, and something you could hear in the actual gear that was missing in plugins or cheap clones and stuff. So what was that actually? Can you put your finger on it? Can you describe that? Because a lot of people, I think, have never heard the analog gear, and they're wondering, what do I even listen? Do I have to listen for? Like, is it worth it switching? Aren't the plugins good enough? And if I have it, if I turn it on, is it going to be a world of a difference? Is it a subtle thing? So what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I would say, making no compromises, no shortcuts, not just, following the original schematics down to the very last capacitor. And even then, for the Pultic, for example, I tried different styles of capacitors for the high end to find out how they sound differently. Like polystyrene, polypropylene, like all these things, and just trying to hear what made the sound, and found out why the original Pultec used a lot of polystyrene capacitors, because they have a very soft. You just can turn it in, and it's really opening the sound. While polyester, for example, is becoming harsh. I just had to find that out, and I know some people would probably hate me for it, but plugins. I mean,
they're good.
No, I mean,
yeah,
they're really good, but just the week before last week, I had an artist at the studio, and he was asking me, like, Martin, just between us, besides all the Analog Vibe stuff, is it really such a difference between the analog gear and the plugins? And I was just saying, hey, bring your friends. We make a session at the studio. We AP it,
Yeah,
and
that's the
so
way.
they came. They came last week, and And we did it, and we had the UAD plugins, silver phase, gray phase, and that's all these things I have in the studio. It's the different revisions from different years with different components. And they were, said, they can't be serious about saying that it's sounding like the real thing. It was not even close. I mean, depending on how far you go. We had like 10 dB gain reduction with an LA2A. You can do it easily. Yeah. It's so transparent.
The more you push it, the more obvious it gets. We had that conversation with Chris Yetta from Audioscape, where we were like, the plugins at some point, many of them, like they crap out, they just fold, they collapse at some point. And the more you push it, the more obvious it gets. But I also think that plugins are still good. I think the difference to me is on the way in, is like when you are able to commit to sound and on the way in on your recording chain you have good analog gear, that really helps. And if you do that, then you can also stay in the box easily in the mixing phase. So I think for a lot of recording artists, it's not only the sound, it's the way you operate it. I think I use an analog piece of gear differently than I use a plugin. Whatever it is, it's like if I can touch it, I make different decisions. It feels different, and on the way in, it's like you commit to a sound and it's unique.
Exactly,
and that's a big part for me. Like,
and the musician, like you mentioned earlier, responds to what they're hearing.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to add. Yeah, that's the inspiration of the sound that you have on your ears when you're recording, and that also makes a huge difference. You know, and I would also say, if you have a good recording chain, that's a major bonus. I mean, most of the audio processing I'm doing at my studio is like 90% is analog, but because most of it is actually on the way in.
Yeah.
And when I'm working in the DAW, it's like I treat it like a tape machine actually, and I just use plugins then to pull something, and maybe gate something and stuff like that. And I don't really want to bash plugins at all.
No, totally.
I was just saying that it's difficult to claim they are sounding exactly like the real deal. I mean, plugins are really, they have their point and they are really good. And the world nowadays you couldn't imagine without plugins because of recallability and everything.
But to be fair, two pieces of hardware also don't sound the same. So that's the thing. It depends on what they exactly modeled. If you take like 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever 1176s from different eras, they won't sound the same.
That is true, but they all have the same signature.
Yeah.
And going back to the example I just mentioned, the LA2 that was not even in the ballpark.
Okay,
it was like what the LA2 is doing. You can check it out at the DIY area back there. We have a silver phase from 1967 replica. It's painstakingly being recreated. And what it's doing to the transients is it's incredible. It's so round and deep. It's just deep, and the plugin is not. Okay. It's like, it's thin and it's sharp. Like the transients is completely different. That's what I. So, but still, of course, all the analog pieces they have tolerances in the components. Of course, they sound a little bit different, but the sound signature is always the same.
Yeah. So I would be interested in hearing if you agree with this. One piece of advice that I often give people is, many people spend quite a bit of money on like many different things that are kind of compromised or like kind of cheap. So they would buy, I won't say any brand names or whatever, but they would buy like a rack full of cheap compressors and a few cheap preamps or whatever. And I always say like it's better to have one really great chain and spend that money there instead of like having many different pieces that don't really do the trick, because I think plugins are better than cheap gear, but like really good analog gear is better than plugins. So I would say have one really cool chain and you can record multiple things through it. So for example, an LA2A, a good preamp, that together, especially if you build it yourself, is actually pretty accessible for many people. It's pretty affordable, and some people spend that same amount of money on like 5, 6, 7 different pieces that aren't that great. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. Like you said before, it's also about making a decision, and that's what I learned when working in the studio with George Fully Fullwood. He's a reggae legend. He was the bass player for Peter Tosh. He was the producer of of 2 of my albums, and he was really a mentor, because when I started as in the box, I was kind of, the record was dead because I was perfect, but it was dead. And when we were there, he was all about making decisions, committing to something, and then just making music. That was all about the vibe, and he repeatedly kept telling me, it's not about perfection, man. It's about the vibe. And he was friends with Bob Marley, and he always said, like, Bob was not the greatest singer. It's how I'm expressed, And so I think that's the key factor, And I had to learn the hard way, because I was, as a singer, you're always kind of, picky, and can we do it over again? And it's, the first single we recorded in the studio, it was just one take, and that was it. And the magic was there. And then I remember my guitar player was saying, but Fully, I played a mistake there. There's not going to be another take.
All right.
There's not going to be another take.
And
That's it.
Did it take you some time to get used to that idea?
Of course
and,
it did.
And now are you like, hey, it is good?
He fooled me, because when I recorded the first song, he said, like, Martin, don't worry, it's only scratch vocals. We won't keep it later.
Yeah, that's.
He kept all of them.
Classic.
He kept all of them, and I was
that's the way to do it.
but it made me perform differently, because I was so relaxed.
Absolutely.
I just felt it.
That's a great trick.
Absolutely, yeah. So how do you get into this? Like, if someone's interested now in trying to do it finally and overcome that mental barrier that we all have, what's the best way to get started? Like, what would you start with? A guitar pedal, something simple, or can you just start with the LA2A? And if so, how? Like, what's the first step?
Yeah, like I said, many people that built the LA2A, or we call it the tube optic compressor, because that's what it is, and they haven't built anything before yet. So the first thing I would recommend is, if you really want to make a start, you can go to analogvibes.com and download this starter guide. It's for free, and then you can find out for yourself, because there's tutorials for everything, which solder to use, and how all these components look like, how to treat them.
How much is it to build like an LA2A?
I would say depending on the components you use, because some people, in the past they were hunting for original transformers, which I did as well, but they've been ridiculously expensive now in last years. So I would say between like 1,600 and upwards, and when we make full kits, which we make once in a while, how Analog Vibes works is we only have like the chassis kits, and we have step-by-step guides, and we have tutorials about how these things work, and to really enable these people. But every year roundabout we make we call it a Build Your Legend series, and we choose one of the projects and we make a full kit,
including all the parts, everything.
So, and we do that with the community, and that gives us a different position also for in terms of suppliers. For the silver phase, for the 96-7 silver phase, we had AMI in the States winding the transformers for us to original specs. So, and for even the pots are made by a niche supplier to original specs, because modern logarithmic pots, they work differently. They go steeper too fast, and it makes the working range of an LA2 really hard. And that's what we can do if we do this Build Your Legend series.
Right. And
so
are these also like 1,500, 1,600 euros, or
I
is it
think
more than? Or?
Yeah, it's a little more. 1,500 was the starting point.
Okay.
But like I said, there upwards. There's you can go all the way.
Just for perspective, what is a brand new LA2A at the moment?
That particular silver face is not available brand new.
Exactly.
The last time I checked on reverb.com was $13,900
for the vintage one,
which is ridiculous. And our kit it's only always these Build Your Legend series are limited editions. It works the way, so we get in touch with the community and we let them know there's something coming up, and then I take them to the studio with me. And I show them how this thing works and how it sounds, and I give them a lot of information. And then there is a certain period of time, like always like 10 days, where we collect, like a crowdfunding, we collect the orders, and then we manufacture.
Cool.
So, and then we know exactly, how many kits we need. So, and because it's just a side project, this is not my main business. And so that's working perfectly. But all of these pieces then are limited editions. And this 96-7 limited edition was $1,749 excluding taxes. And then you have everything. And it's like painstakingly.
$1,749, yeah, that's great.
Like, modeled after the 96-7 silver face.
That's great. That's great. And another big factor is time. like for myself, for example, I'm a full-time mixing engineer,
Yeah.
always pretty busy. We have the self-recording band in addition to that. And then I know in our community there's many hobby musicians who have a day job, and then whatever time is left, they create music, and they have all these things to worry about, and family and whatever. And so people are probably wondering, like, how long does it take me? How much time do I have to put into building such a thing? Is this a year-long project or more than that? Can I do it in my spare time?
Yeah, I mean, the most time you usually spend sourcing parts. With our analog vibes projects, we have to, we try to take this thing out of the equation. Like if you just buy the chassis kit, you get a bill of materials with links to the shops and retailers we can purchase the stuff. So it's really not the thing.
Streamlined.
Yeah, it's streamlined. And with the full kits, of course, you get everything in the box. And I mean, depending on how skilled you are, like I think for me in LA Tour, I take 2 afternoons of work, and then it's done. But if you're not that skilled, probably takes you a week.
Still worth it though, because I mean, time is money, and you always think, like, when you do it for a job, you always think, is it worth it doing it myself? But if that's the case, it's totally worth it still.
Yeah, and you don't do it probably during your job time, you're doing daytime, you just do it, and
it's also a fun project. You do it because of the process, because of the act of creating, and it's like it always is. If you build something yourself, you're way more proud of it at the end of the day, and you
like
use
I
it
said,
more.
I just said the empowerment factor. You learn things, but the major empowerment thing is, you can imagine, Lego is for kids, the same thing. You build something, you create something, and but with the gear you have the meta level, because you create something and then you create something with what you created.
Right. Yeah.
So it's incredible. It's really the moment when I switch on the first LA2A and the view meter light up and the needle goes up. It's like Christmas. It's like you can't put it in words.
Yeah.
I always compare it to that. You know that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, when he tries for days to make fire and then finally makes it. And he's jumping around like crazy. I have made fire. That's exactly the I have made fire moment,
Everybody can relate. I mean, everyone who's ever built anything is like, you can buy a chair or you can make your own chair. Which one will you like more? Okay, or like you can buy tomatoes, or you can grow your own and then be super excited that you have your own tomatoes. Whatever, it's like.
The only thing though you have to be aware of, it's addictive.
Yeah.
You can't just say I try it and then
Yeah, that's funny. The other thing that I think our audience in particular would be interested in is taking it a step further and modding something to be unique to what they imagine.
Yeah.
Which I would imagine comes after a certain level of experience. But is that something that your community delves into as well?
Yes, exactly. Sometimes, like I said, by mistake, sometimes on purpose. With the Pultec, for example, I was really trying to find these capacitors, like I said, and I choose for one of the units, I chose the ones that were sounding nicest to my ear, just personal preference, But also sometimes things happen by mistake. We had one of our community members, we were building a tube mid-range equalizer, which is the Pultec MEQ5, and there's some filter coils in there, and he by mistake soldered together 2 lead wires of that coil that were not supposed to go together, and but it sounded great. So he measured it, and he found out that the high peak EQ was becoming a high shelf.
Oh. Yeah.
And so he was posting it in the community, and everybody was like, wow, yeah, it's working. And then on my MEQ, I was just including a push-pull switch, like it's peak, it's shelf. You just can, and you have a piece of gear that can do more than the original.
Yeah.
Still the same signature.
So when you build one of these, and let's say after a while, for whatever reason, something breaks, or left, right, or I don't know if you have stereo pieces, if it's all mono. No, it's all mono. Okay, let's say something breaks or needs calibration or whatever. Are you then also able to do that yourself, or do you have to send it somewhere for service then?
No, for sure.
Once you've built it, you know how to fix it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I mean, it's a great bonus too, because if you have other gear, you might be able to service it.
For sure. That's, it's all going under that empowerment thing.
Yeah.
It's really, we just had it when we came here. The Pultec 10 kilohertz was not working. I mean, we're from southern Germany. We drove all the way up here, and it was a 2-minute fix. It was really simple. And I mean, in the beginning, it can take you some time to troubleshoot something, but you get quicker, and it's. Yeah.
Where are you in southern Germany? Because I'm there as well.
Tübingen.
Tübingen. Oh, that's not too far actually.
Yeah.
So I'm going to announce something here because I like a good challenge, and that's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm going to give myself a lot of time because I don't know when I'll have it, but I'm going to announce now that like 2024 at the latest is the year when I'm going to build my first compressor, like my first LA2 or whatever I'm going to be choosing, but my first piece of gear, and I'm going to keep the community updated on that, how that goes. But I'm going to hit you up, and I'm going to build my first one. Yeah, I want to do it now. So, yeah,
I can only encourage everyone. I mean, like I said, the major barrier is inside here, and the most important thing is to make the first step.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get to the end here, does anyone have questions for Martin? Do we have time for some questions, or?
Looks like we do. Any questions?
What was the most rewarding piece of gear you ever worked on, and why?
Wow, that's a good question. I think the most rewarding and even surprising piece of gear was the Universal Audio 176 limiting amplifier, which is a Varimu compressor, because I had no clue how this thing will sound, and I was actually just building it because the community wanted us to do a 176. And I had very little information. I had the original manual with schematics and the print of the PCBs, and I had photos.
Mm-hmm.
So my friend and I, who's doing the construction work on the chassis, we just tried to find something we can reference to. And from there we measured everything else. And then we built the 176, and it took me quite a while because even there was mistakes in the schematics, probably on purpose, I don't know, but I found them and I fixed it. And when I switched it on for the very first time, I had no clue, how this thing will sound. So, and it sounded so amazing, and I had never heard anything like it before in terms of sound characteristics. So I just put a guitar through it, like an acoustic guitar, and then I put the release to fast release, and I was just starting to fly, and I was just, what is going on, And this was something special because the LA2, I knew kind of where it was going.
Right.
And also I could ask people in the message boards how this thing is built and everything, but with the 176 I was all by myself.
Right.
And then we shipped out a batch of 80 kits, and there was somebody from San Francisco, and he had an original one, and he got in touch with me and he said, like, that PCB is 8 millimeters too long that you made, but are you kidding me? You built it from photos? And then he just measured everything in his original and sent it back to us and said, for your next revision,
Awesome.
Now you have it.
That's killer. That's killer. 176 is my favorite compressor I think I've ever used as well.
Really?
Just love them.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good question.
Any other questions?
I got one. Where should people find you?
Oh yeah, that's a good one actually.
analogvibes.com, and here on the Studioszene we're just in the DIY area back there, where people can also solder stuff. Like we brought some small projects that you can do within 30-40 minutes, like a reamping box or a cloud lifter.
Awesome.
But yeah, other than that, analogvibes.com.
Awesome. And what about your music?
Well, that's the thing. I just step back with the music, working more in the studio, and I have kids now, and I found out that touring the world is not the way to go then. And then we created the studio, and we created like a big area around the studio. It's like a co-working, co-creation area, and many new ideas came up there. I think that's too much to talk about all this right now. But many startups kind of evolved from there, and I'm actually a designer, so I went in there and as a designer and helped creating things. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you for joining us live here. Thank you for watching the stream if you're live now online, and thank you for listening later if you're listening to this on the podcast. And please, everyone, big round of applause for Martin Zobel.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.